My wife left me for her rich CEO after telling everyone I was a failure who would never amount to anything. She took the house, the friends, and even convinced most of my family to side with her. A few months later, while working a temporary night shift, I received an unexpected message from someone inside her company. Attached were photos, emails, and financial records that revealed a secret my wife and her CEO had been desperately hiding. The more I investigated, the more I realized their perfect relationship was about to collapse in a way neither of them could have predicted. "You're a joke, you know that?" Teresa's voice carried across the restaurant, loud enough that the table of her co-workers went silent. I don't know why I wasted 10 years on someone who was never going to be anything. The waiter froze mid-pour. Jerome sat beside her, smirking into his wine glass like he'd been waiting all night for this moment. I didn't argue. I didn't raise my voice. I just stood up, put $40 on the table for my half of a dinner I hadn't finished, and walked out into the parking lot. 6 months later, I'd be sitting alone in a security booth at 2 a.m. when my phone buzzed with a message from a name I didn't recognize. I almost didn't open it. That decision would unravel everything Teresa and Jerome had spent years building. The divorce moved fast, faster than I expected, like she'd been planning her exit long before that dinner. She kept the house. Her name was on the deed because of a refinance I'd agreed to 2 years earlier, back when I trusted her with everything. I kept a duffel bag of clothes and a credit card with a $400 limit. The friends went next. Marcus and Dana, people I'd known since college, suddenly had a lot going on whenever I texted. I found out later Teresa had told them I'd been distant and cold for years, that she'd tried everything before giving up. They believed her. Why wouldn't they? She cried beautifully. Then my own family. My brother Bradley called me exactly once, and the first thing out of his mouth was, "Man, what did you do to her? She's a mess." I didn't do anything. That was the part nobody wanted to hear. I took a temp job working night security at a logistics warehouse because it paid weekly and I needed weekly. 12-hour shifts, mostly alone, watching grainy monitors and listening to forklifts hum in the distance. I told myself it couldn't get worse than this. Lost the house, the friends, most of my family, and the only woman I'd ever really loved, to her boss, of all people. Then, on a Tuesday night in March, my phone lit up with a message from someone named Yvonne. No profile picture. No mutual contacts. Just a short line. "You don't know me, but I think you deserve to know what's really going on. I have proof. Are you ready to see it?" I stared at it for a long time. I didn't realize it then, but opening that message would change everything. If you enjoy real stories like this, subscribe, because what happened next changed everything for me. I met Teresa 9 years ago at a coffee shop near my apartment. She'd ordered an oat milk latte and then realized she'd left her wallet at home. I paid for it. She paid me back 2 days later with a sticky note that said, "I owe you one coffee, for life," stuck to a $5 bill. I still had that note in my wallet until the day she left. We were broke together for a long time. She was finishing her business degree, working retail on weekends. I was doing IT support for a company that underpaid me, but gave me flexible hours so I could help her study. We used to sit on the floor of her studio apartment eating instant ramen, going over flashcards, and she'd say, "When I make it, I'm taking you somewhere with real tablecloths." We had a running joke about real tablecloths for years. Every time we went somewhere nice, one of us would say it, and we'd both laugh. When her mom got sick, I drove her 4 hours each way every weekend for 8 months so she wouldn't have to do it alone. When I lost my job during a round of layoffs, she picked up extra shifts without complaint and never once made me feel small for it. We talked about a future, a house with a porch, maybe a dog first, kids later. She used to fall asleep talking about floor plans for a kitchen we couldn't afford yet. Looking back, there were small things. The way she started saying, "When I get promoted," instead of "when we get ahead." The way she'd mentioned Jerome's name a little too often, a little too fondly. "Jerome thinks I have real potential," she said once. And I remember feeling a flicker of something I couldn't name and didn't want to examine. I didn't examine it. I was happy. I didn't want to ruin happy by looking too closely. It started small. She stopped laughing at the real tablecloths joke. The first time, I figured she was tired. The second time, she actually rolled her eyes. Then came the comparisons. Jerome's wife redid their whole kitchen. It's gorgeous. "Did you see what Marcus just got promoted to? Must be nice." Small comments, dropped casually, like seeds. She started going to more work dinners. Late nights became later. When I asked about her day, the answers got shorter. When I tried to plan a weekend trip for our anniversary, she said work was too crazy right now, but posted photos 2 weeks later from a company retreat at a vineyard, looking relaxed and glowing in a dress I'd never seen. At a holiday party for her office, she introduced me to a coworker as my husband. He does computer stuff. Just like that. 8 years of marriage reduced to computer stuff, said with the same tone you'd use for a coat check attendant. Dana pulled me aside that night. Hey, is everything okay with you guys? Teresa seems different lately. I brushed it off. We're fine. Just busy. I wasn't fine. I just didn't know what I was looking at yet. 3 weeks later, I found a hotel charge on our shared card. A hotel 2 towns over, on a night she'd told me she was staying at her sister's for a girls' weekend. When I asked her about it, she didn't even flinch. It's a work thing. Jerome books rooms for the team sometimes when we have early meetings. God, are you seriously checking my receipts now? This is exactly the kind of insecurity I'm talking about. I apologized. I actually apologized. That was the night I should have asked more questions. I didn't. 3 months later, she asked for a divorce. She didn't cry. She didn't hesitate. She sat across from me at our kitchen table, the one we bought secondhand and refinished together, and said, I think we both know this hasn't been working for a long time. I deserve to be with someone who matches my ambition. I asked if there was someone else. She said, don't make this about that. This is about us not growing in the same direction. It took 6 weeks for not growing in the same direction to become a public relationship with Jerome. Her CEO, 22 years older, recently divorced himself, with a net worth that made local business journals. The story she told everyone was that I'd given up years ago, that I was content to coast, while she worked herself to exhaustion trying to build something, that she'd stayed as long as she could but finally had to choose herself. People believed it. Of course they did. She was articulate, sympathetic, and Jerome's money made everything she said sound like wisdom instead of justification. I moved into a studio apartment above a laundromat. I took the night security job because the day shifts required interviews and references, and I didn't have the energy to perform fine for strangers yet. That's where I was, sitting in a folding chair, watching 8 security feeds of an empty warehouse, when Yvonne's message came through. I almost deleted it. Spam, probably, or some scam targeting people going through public divorces. But something about the wording, I think you deserve to know what's really going on, made my stomach tighten. I opened it. There were 3 attachments. A folder of photos, a set of forwarded emails, and a spreadsheet labeled Q3_adjustments_final_V4. The photos showed Teresa and Jerome together, but the timestamps were from over a year before she and I had even started arguing. Before the hotel charge. Before any of it. The emails were between Jerome and someone in HR, discussing restructuring Teresa's role and managing optics with her husband's situation. The spreadsheet made no sense to me at all. Just numbers, dates, and a tab labeled Personal, Do Not Share. Nothing fit together. If this affair had started over a year before I even noticed anything was wrong, then everything Teresa had told me, and everyone else, about when things changed was a lie. But why would Jerome's company be discussing managing optics about my marriage a year before I even knew there was a problem? I sat in that security booth at 3 in the morning, surrounded by silent monitors, staring at a spreadsheet I didn't understand, and felt something I hadn't felt in months. Not heartbreak. Curiosity. I texted Yvonne back the next morning. Just one line. Why are you sending me this? Her response took 2 hours. I used to work in Jerome's office. I saw things I shouldn't have. I'm not doing this to hurt you. I'm doing this because what happened to you wasn't really about Teresa leaving you. It was bigger than that, and I think you have a right to know. I asked her to explain. She said it was better to show me, piece by piece, because if I just told you, you wouldn't believe me. So I started digging. The first thing I did was look up the dates on those photos. They were from a corporate retreat, 18 months before Teresa asked for a divorce, and almost a full year before the hotel charge that had first made me suspicious. If Jerome and Teresa's relationship had started that early, that meant the entire timeline I'd believed, slow drift, gradual falling out of love, an affair that began only after our marriage had already failed, was backwards. The affair came first. Everything else was the aftermath. I called Marcus. He didn't pick up the first 2 times. The third time, I think guilt got to him, because he answered and immediately said, Look, man, I didn't know how bad it actually was, I swear. How bad what was? There was a long pause. Teresa told us, like, 2 years ago, that you guys were already basically done, that you checked out emotionally, and she was just staying for financial reasons until she could get back on her feet. We figured. I don't know. We figured you knew that's how she felt. 2 years ago. That lined up almost exactly with the start of the photos. I went back through old emails, old calendars, anything I still had access to. I found an email from Teresa to her sister, accidentally CC'd to a shared family account I still had login access to, a mistake on her part. She'd forgotten to remove me after the divorce. The email was from 16 months earlier. The subject line, exit plan. The body referenced the timeline we discussed, keeping appearances normal until Q3, and a line that made my hands cold. He still has no idea. Jerome says as long as nothing's documented before the restructuring closes, we're fine. Restructuring. The same word from the emails Yvonne sent. I texted her again. What restructuring? What's closing? This time her reply came almost instantly, like she'd been waiting. That's the part that connects to you directly. Are you sitting down? I met Yvonne in person 2 days later at a diner near the warehouse during my lunch break at 1 a.m. She was in her late 30s, tired looking, with the particular wariness of someone who'd recently quit a job under bad terms. I'm not here because I feel sorry for you, she said, before I'd even sat down. I'm here because what they did wasn't just to you. It was to a lot of people, and I was one of the ones who had to clean up after it. I asked her to start from the beginning. She told me she'd worked in finance compliance at Jerome's company for 6 years. About 2 years ago, she started noticing irregularities in a subsidiary account, small transfers, oddly timed, routed through a personal holding entity registered under Jerome's name. When she flagged it internally, she was told it was a personal investment matter, unrelated to company finances, and to drop it. She didn't drop it. Quietly, she kept records. The transfers, she said, started about 8 months before Jerome and Teresa's relationship became visible to anyone in the office. But people who were close to both of them, people in upper management, already knew something was going on long before that. There were whispers. HR had files. Files about what? About Teresa. About complaints. Yvonne hesitated. About a pattern. Teresa wasn't the first. That landed like a punch I didn't see coming. The first what? The first executive assistant Jerome got involved with while married to someone else. Yvonne pulled out her phone and showed me a document. A termination agreement, heavily redacted, for a woman who'd worked at the company 4 years before Teresa was hired. The settlement amount was substantial. The non-disclosure clause was aggressive. He has a pattern, Yvonne said. Get involved with someone ambitious, someone who needs him professionally. Restructure their role so it looks like merit-based advancement. Eventually the spouse finds out. There's a messy public exit, and the company quietly absorbs the fallout because Jerome is the company's biggest asset. I sat there, trying to process it. So Teresa wasn't just, she was part of something he's done before. She might not have known that, Yvonne said carefully. Or she might not have cared. I genuinely don't know which. But here's the part that involves you directly. She slid the spreadsheet, the same one from my email, across the table and pointed to the tab labeled Personal, Do Not Share. This is a record of payments, she said, made from Jerome's personal holding account, to a law firm. The law firm that handled your divorce settlement negotiations on Teresa's behalf. I stared at the numbers. Jerome paid for Teresa's divorce lawyer? Jerome paid for everything. The refinance on your house that put it solely in her name. That wasn't her idea, or not only her idea. There's a paper trail showing Jerome's company connections helped expedite that refinance 18 months before the divorce, while you two were still together and you had no idea anything was wrong. The room felt very quiet. They didn't just have an affair, Yvonne said. They planned your divorce. Financially. In advance. While you still thought you were saving your marriage. I should have felt rage. What I actually felt was something closer to vertigo, like the floor of my entire life for the last 2 years had been a stage set, and I was the only person who hadn't known it. Why are you telling me this now? I asked. Why not when you found it? Yvonne's jaw tightened. Because 3 weeks ago, I found something else. Something that's not about you and Teresa at all. And once you see it, you'll understand why I had to come forward, and why I couldn't keep sitting on any of it. Yvonne handed me a thumb drive. I copied this before I left. I want you to understand. What's on here isn't really about your divorce. Your divorce was just a side effect. Collateral damage from something much bigger. I plugged it into a laptop at the diner's counter outlet. Folders of financial documents, internal memos, and a series of emails between Jerome and the company's board going back nearly 3 years. The story they told was this: the restructuring mentioned in every document wasn't about Teresa's job title. It was the cover story for something else entirely. Jerome had been quietly siphoning company funds through that personal holding entity Yvonne mentioned, structured to look like legitimate consulting fees and executive development expenses. Over 3 years, the total exceeded $4 million. Teresa's promotion, the one she'd credited entirely to her own hard work, the one she'd used as proof that I was holding her back, by comparison, had been engineered specifically so she'd have signing authority over the department where these transfers were processed. She approved invoices, dozens of them, for consulting firms that, according to public records Yvonne had cross-referenced, didn't actually exist. Did she know? I asked, and I genuinely didn't know which answer I wanted. I think, Yvonne said slowly. She knew enough to not ask questions and not enough to understand what would happen if anyone else did. Jerome compartmentalizes. He gives people just enough rope to be useful and not enough to see the whole picture. I don't think Teresa was masterminding fraud. I think she was used, the same way the company's money was used, the same way your marriage was used. She got the lifestyle, the title, the man who told her she was special. In exchange, she signed what she was told to sign and didn't look too hard at why. And the affair? The exit plan email? That part she absolutely knew about and chose, Yvonne said. I'm not excusing that. She made a decision about you, with her eyes open, over a long period of time, and she let you believe it was your fault. That part is on her. But the bigger thing, the fraud, the $4 million, the pattern with previous assistants, that's the thing the board doesn't know yet. That's the thing that's about to come out. Why are you telling me before it comes out? Yvonne looked at me for a long moment. Because when this breaks, Teresa's name is going to be all over it. Signing authority, her signature on dozens of fraudulent invoices. Even if she didn't orchestrate it, she's exposed. And I figured, after everything, you deserve to know the truth before the rest of the world found out a version of it. You shouldn't have to learn what really happened to your marriage from a news article. I sat with that for a long time. The version of events I'd been living with, that I'd failed, that Teresa had simply outgrown me and found someone better, had been a story written for an audience, and I'd been cast as the villain in it so no one would ask harder questions. The real story was uglier and stranger, and somehow made me feel less broken, not more. None of it had ever actually been about whether I was enough. What happens now? I asked. Now, Yvonne said, it stops being something only you and I know about. I didn't call a lawyer first. I didn't call Teresa. I sent Yvonne's documentation, the parts that were hers to share, properly, to the company's audit committee, with a brief note explaining how I'd come to receive it and from whom. I'm told the board meeting that followed lasted 11 hours. Within a week, it was in the local business press, an internal investigation into irregular financial practices at Jerome's company, an unnamed executive signing authority under review, a CEO placed on indefinite leave pending an external audit. The articles were careful with names, but careful doesn't mean invisible, not in a town this size. Teresa called me 4 times in 2 days. I didn't answer the first 3. On the 4th, I picked up, mostly out of curiosity about what version of events she'd land on this time. You did this, she said. Not a question. I forwarded documents to an audit committee, I said. I didn't write any of them. You don't understand what you've done. I could lose everything. My career, I know, I said. I read the spreadsheet too, Teresa. I read about the refinance. I read the email to your sister. I know what exit plan meant, and I know when it started. Silence on the line. Jerome handled all that. She finally said, quieter now. I didn't know the details. You don't have to explain it to me, I said. You really don't. I'm not the one you need to convince anymore. I hung up. It wasn't dramatic. I didn't feel triumphant. I just felt done. Marcus texted that weekend. Hey man, I owe you an apology. A big one. Can we talk? Dana sent something similar. Even Bradley called, and for once didn't open with an accusation. I should have asked more questions before taking her side, he said. I'm sorry. I told all of them the same thing, more or less. I appreciated it, but I wasn't interested in relitigating the last 2 years. I wasn't angry at them anymore. I just didn't need anything from them right now. Jerome resigned within the month, to focus on personal matters, which is corporate speak for, before he could be fired with cause. The audit was ongoing last I heard. Teresa's name came up in it, not as the architect, but as someone who'd benefited from and provided cover for things she should have questioned and didn't. I didn't feel the urge to watch it unfold from the front row. I read about it the same way I'd read about anyone else's bad year, at a distance, without much investment. I saw Teresa once more, about 2 months later, at a grocery store of all places. She looked thinner, tired in a way money hadn't been able to fix. She saw me before I saw her, and for a second I watched her brace, like she was preparing for a confrontation, an argument, maybe even satisfaction on my part. "Hey," she said carefully. "Hey," I said. "I heard you got a new job. Software support, somewhere downtown." "Yeah, it's good. I like it." She seemed thrown by how ordinary that was. I wanted to say, "You don't have to," I said, and I meant it kindly. "I'm not waiting for an apology. I'm not really thinking about any of it that much anymore." "You're not angry?" I thought about it, honestly, because I owed myself an honest answer. I was, for a while. But the person I was angry at, the version of you I built my whole adult life around, I'm not sure she ever really existed the way I thought she did. So it's hard to stay angry at someone I'm not sure I ever actually knew. She didn't have a response to that. I think she'd been ready for tears, or rage, or some opening to explain herself. What she got instead was a man checking the expiration date on a carton of eggs, mildly more interested in dinner than in her. "Take care of yourself, Teresa," I said, and I went to pay for my groceries. She spent years trying to convince everyone, including me, that I wasn't enough. In the end, I stopped needing her to decide.